Hi everyone, welcome back. Today let's talk about Yaoyao, because I believe there's a bit of a discrepancy and a very large disparity between what people will actually use or think of Yaoyao if they get her and how she's being pushed or explained or in any way, shape or form judged. I want to start this off by saying I'm a day one player. I've been playing Genshin Impact since its very release and I love it. But as I've mentioned numerous times in previous videos, I think there's a recent decline in 4-star quality. Now don't get me wrong, Yaoyao is not Dory, she is not Layla, she is not Kale. But I don't think she's on the level of a 4-star healer. Let's consider that for most situations. 4-star units usually aren't going to be as good as 5 stars, we all know that. With the exception of something like Bennett, Xiangling, Xingqiu, and Sucrose, alongside Fischl, depending on what you're using her for. If we're excluding those, one of the things that matters is that a 4-star performs really well in their specific niche, especially if you are losing potential time, potential damage, or sacrificing something else for that unit's value. Yaoyao is not good. At least she is not good enough to justify what she costs. Because Yaoyao is a Dendro healer and she's the only Dendro healer and one of the few Dendro characters we have, a lot of people are going to be saying she's great, and that could be true. She is great, but she's only great compared to the competition that she currently has, and that competition is nobody. But if you're comparing her for healing and anyone else, without just locking it down to Dendro, Yaoyao doesn't perform as good as she should. Diona is the 4-star cryo healer who ran alongside Zhongli's first banner, and she's a far better healer, not necessarily because she heals the highest amount or anything like that, but because she offers something more. Her healing is off-field and her shield provides you with some protection. Sayu's healing with her initial burst activation heals your entire party a bit, and then it continues off-field. She also heals you every time she swirls, at least while she's in her E. Bennett is self-explanatory, let's not talk about him. Chichi, even though Chichi is considered a 5-star healer by most individual circumstances, and she's also considered a bad healer, her healing is all done off the field, and with her burst she heals the entire party a bit, marks enemies, and then you swap to whatever character you want to deal damage. The point I'm trying to make here is that every other healer, to a degree, allows you to be off-field, and even if we're considering the free one you get, namely Barbara, her burst heals the entire party, and her skill heals you or whatever active character she's on. And at C6, which many of you likely unfortunately have, she revives a character. The only other unit with a revive feature is C6 Chichi. I won't be comparing somebody like Yaoyao to Jean outright, or Kokomi, but even Kuki Shinobu drains her own HP. She allows more healing based on the element mastery that she builds because she's meant for Hyper Bloom or Dendro teams. Alongside that, she has 100% uptime, especially once you get that C2 or almost 100% uptime without it. And her healing is pretty fast and pretty sizable. The point I want to make here is that because each of these other healers offer something either in the form of reactions or in the form of a buffing with Bennett and things like that, and their constellations only improve that feature. Bennett's constellation improves energy recharge or remove the attack modifier limit. Kuki Shinobu provides more uptime, Diona at C6 provides elemental mastery buffs, and so on. Even Sayu provides elemental mastery scaling for her healing. If we're considering this, Yaoyao's healing is entirely done on field. You cannot switch off of Yaoyao, and even if you're saying, yeah, she heals the entire party, the question isn't does she heal the entire party in an instant. The question that should be asked is A, is it worthwhile because you can't swap to other units, and B, is it worthwhile in the sense that does she have the consistency to justify it? If Yaoyao can heal the entire party, cool. But if she can't do it consistently, to the extent to which you'd be able to deal with enemies with corrosion and things like that pretty efficiently, then it's not worthwhile. She has a very high energy cost burst, and she also doesn't generate a lot of energy to begin with. And her constellations, and I understand this, if you are an individual who's used to sumo characters, you know that constellations usually lock power behind a unit, meaning that you won't get the full value of a unit without the constellations. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is a constellation for a unit should improve their features and their existing abilities. It shouldn't be worthless or brushed off. Bennett's constellations, and I know it's unfair to compare him with Bennett, so let's compare them with other units. As much as individuals would look at Diona and say her constellations don't matter, one provides more shielding with co-op whenever she does her E, another one increases the viability of her shield and her burst with the second skill and burst buffs. C6 increases her own ability to help out your team with the elemental mastery buff, which is about 200 I believe, and that does stack with Kazuha. And if we're going through other units, there are different benefits each one gains. But I'm not trying to, I don't want people to say or think that I want units to lock their value behind constellations like a C1 or C2. I just want Yaoyao to be able to do stuff with her constellations. For instance, if her C1 was like Bennett or Sayu's, in that it removed her ability to be on field. She didn't need to be on field to heal your entire party. That would be a useful feature. Yaoyao takes team time away. If you are in a team like something with Yaimiko or somebody else who deals damage without having to be on field, cool. But for most teams, I'm not looking at a healer that slots into one very specific type of team. I'm looking at, does this unit work with a variety of teams? Because at the end of the day, Genshin Impact is about resource management. You essentially have to look at your units, look at your team, and decide which teams are most viable for a lot of the content in the game, especially Abyss. And then you have to look at the units you have and decide which ones are worth building. For instance, Yaoyao for me wasn't worth building unless I had a Raiden Shogun to pair her with or an Aggravate team. I pair her with Raiden, simply because I enjoy both of them together and it's pretty fun and fluid. I wouldn't have built Xiangling if I wasn't going to use her in Ganyu Melt. I wouldn't have built Xingqiu or Yelan if I wasn't going to use them with somebody like Yoimiya. And regardless of what I just said, all of those units are also pretty valuable in just overworld exploration or any team. If I'm looking at Yaoyao, and I'm looking at her healing, and I'm looking at her kit, and I know that she has to be on-field and that she only provides enough value in Dendro teams, she is not worthwhile. Because at the moment, we don't have enough Dendro characters to actively judge her. And 2, I don't know how many individuals are actively utilizing Dendro teams. If you are, cool, more power to you. But I don't think it's fair to say Yaoyao is the equivalent to a 5-star, Yaoyao is amazing, or one of the best 4-stars in a long time, because let's be honest, all of the 4-stars in Sumeru were pretty bad. Like, let's not sugarcoat it, Sumeru didn't really provide us with anything good. At best, we had Nahida. What, is anyone going to point out Nilo and say she's amazing? Nilo requires you to either have Kokomi or some form of Dendro applicator like Nahida. Alhaitham wants Nahida. Sino wants Nahida. Sumeru is the region that locks pretty much all of its 5-stars to its Archon, and despite how lore heavy that could be, or how, weaved into the lore and story of the game it could be, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you would essentially need a 5-star. Can anyone tell me why Sino, who takes more on-field time, or about as much on-field time as Xiao, requires somebody else, specifically an Archon, to support him? Xiao could work with something like Diona. Are you going to put your Sino with Kale? Are you going to put your Sino with Yaoyao? I don't like Sumeru. I want that to be honest. Nothing in Sumeru except for Tighnari really excited me. Like, they were all cool and they had great designs, but in terms of kit, they were like meh, and Dea's looking to be the same. So I don't like Yaoyao being pitched as a 5-star equivalent or as this amazing 4-star healer, because if you are not using Dendro teams or teams that benefit a lot from Dendro, Yaoyao is not worthwhile to build over somebody like a Sayu, somebody like a Chichi, somebody like a Diona, somebody like a Kokomi or Jean. Even Kuki Shinobu works great. And yeah, her mats are easier to farm because they're all in Liyue, except for the boss mat, which is in Sumeru, which requires you to use a Dendro character to kill the boss or finally finish him off. I think there's a dramatic 4-star decline, and I'm not looking at it as 4-stars should be very viable in every team. I'm looking at it as 4-stars should be worth building. And viability and versatility does play a big part in that. But instead of just focusing on that, I want to focus on what does a unit rely on. If Yaoyao's value is incredibly dependent on what elemental reactions she's assisting in causing, it's not worthwhile. Whereas if her healing and her consistency alongside the uptime are good, that's good value. Her elemental skill provides you with a little bit of healing and some Dendro application. But her little bit of healing can also be blocked by enemies. And considering that she requires you to be on field to maintain that burst healing, even if it is a short duration, you're sacrificing damage in other units. And yes, this could only matter in the Spiral Abyss, but let's be honest here, a lot of people care about the Spiral Abyss. You wouldn't build your units if you didn't really care about the Spiral Abyss, because you could probably clear most of the enemies in the game with level 70 units, or even level 60. So as much as everybody says, yeah, the Spiral Abyss is the only endgame content, and yeah, it doesn't matter, it objectively does, because every unit should be built around the concept of you bringing them into the Abyss, because that is the endgame, that is the hardest content we have in the game. And if you cannot make a good argument for a character being built to be brought into the Spiral Abyss, that is a bad unit. I'm confused as to what happened to the days where we would look at a 4-star and be like, they're trash, needs to be buffed, and instead just like, no, they're amazing. Doria was awful, and not many people talked about that. She was awful, and she is awful. Kale's boomerang is an idiotic feature, and her burst having weird ICD is weird too, and idiotic in my opinion. I know Hoyoverse doesn't want to power creep the original 4-stars, but we desperately need that, because as of right now, no 4-star or 5-star is able to contend with them. Yelan was able to match Xingqiu, but not even for Hu Tao. Xingqiu with C2 still beats out Yelan in uptime, and at C0 he beats out Yelan in Hydro application. Zhang has no competitor, Bennett has no competitor. Fischl had what, Yaimiko? Sucrose had Kazuha, and that's it. But with Freedom Sworn, Kazuha beats out Sucrose. I feel like we need more competition for the original 4-stars, and I feel like we need the final and future 4-stars that we're either getting in Sumeru or Fontaine and etc. to actually be worth building and investing into. You shouldn't just be building a character because you like them. I understand if you do, and I built out characters because I like them as well. But what I'm saying is you should also be able to justify a use for that character long term. Jinyan mains build out Xinyan, and I understand that, and they love her, cool. But there is no reason that Hoyoverse should have released Xinyan as bad as she is. It shouldn't be waifu or meta, it should be waifu and meta. Your waifu should be meta. She should be good. She should be worth the effort. But that's just my opinion. Tell me yours in the comment section down below. Either way, hey, see you next time.